17th, 2022 to order. Could I get a motion? Oh, I don't need a motion. I'm not going to executive session tonight. This is a first. So calling our meeting to order, and I'm just going to do it by roll call vote. Don?
Aye.
Larry?
Aye.
Julie?
Aye.
And I'm an aye. John, would you like to call your meeting to order?
Good evening, folks. My name is John Story, Chair of the Finance Committee. I'd like to call our meeting to order with a roll call vote. Mark Maris. Aye. Dan. Aye. Karen.
Aye.
Angelo.
Aye.
Mark. Aye. And I'm an aye. All present, 6.
Thank you. Tonight, the only announcement on the agenda tonight is this, Tuesday, April 12th, 2022 is the last day to register to vote in the local elections on Tuesday, May 17th. We have one consent agenda tonight before we get into the joint meeting. Can I get a motion on that, Julie?
Yeah, no pledge
Oh,
of
actually,
allegiance or no?
No,
Yeah.
no public comment. Do you want to talk about this?
Separate.
Go ahead. Go ahead. This isn't a regular meeting, so we didn't have public comment on tonight, but we will allow you a little comment.
Thank you. So I just want, Dan Pelletier, Water Wastewater Superintendent, I just wanted to announce, I was made aware that the survey crew is going to be out starting next week on Route 28 to do the survey for the wastewater project. So just, if people see a crew out, they may be delivering notices to those along Route 28 between Division Street and the Herring River. So just want to make that announcement.
Thank you, Dan.
Okay. So discussion, sorry, discussion.
You just moved to approve.
Just move to approve, right? The group of residents asking the board's permission to place yellow bands around Harwich's blue fire hydrants, only those located on main roads, as a sign of support for Ukraine.
Any second on that, and then we'll get,
I'll second for discussion.
go ahead.
I'm just curious where we're coming from with this, because once the water department became an enterprise fund, they owned, I thought that they owned the fire hydrants. The fire department uses the fire hydrants, but as a point of ownership, I thought it would be the commissioners. I heartily endorse the idea.
Where we were coming from is Peter Hughes asked us to support it.
Yeah.
So that's what this is. Dan, would you get up? They had a water commissioners meeting on this yesterday, I believe.
Yeah, the Water Commission did meet yesterday, and they did vote to approve or support the effort.
Thank you.
Any further discussion? All right, roll call vote. Don?
Aye.
Larry?
Aye.
Julie?
Aye.
And I'm an aye.
You're an aye down here, too.
Yeah, we have an echo. Okay, now we're going to open the joint meeting with the Finance Committee. And the first discussion piece is discussion and possible vote on the SAFER grant for fire department. David, if you mind just come up. I think it's really just the board needs to make a decision on whether they're going to support this or not. I would ask the board if they have any questions or comments for the chief and the deputy chief. And I'll start with Larry.
Thanks for coming in again.
Welcome.
And presenting this. I guess last time you were here, I had really two questions. Funding for when the grant runs out. That was one question. Second one was, if those personnel are hired and you have a vacancy, can they take that, could they be moved over to full-time positions and then the number be reduced? In other words, we can use the help and then use those people that are trained to backfill positions
Yeah.
and possibly lower our overall expenses going forward.
You could attrit those positions into retirements going forward over the next 3 or 4 years.
I know that
absolutely.
messes up your plan because
Yeah,
then
it's
you're
not
you're
the
lower. I
part of
understand
the
that, but there's
plan,
an
but
option.
yes.
Okay. And the funding going forward, if you're giving that some more thought on,
I mean, the short answer is that's kind of out of, we don't have means to fund it out of the fire department budget, other than to put in for it and then,
right, so that comes back to us.
yeah.
It does.
Yep,
Thanks for that.
you're welcome.
Don?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I've been supportful for years with the staffing in the fire department. And I'm not sure if everybody's eyes are wide open that there's any real downside to this, because everybody coming in has to know that if we run out of money, that the last person hired is the first person laid off. And it, by the way, it wouldn't matter whether they were grant hired or through the budget plan.
Correct.
So I'd kind of like to do it, if only because I recognize that the town grew by about 10% over the last year and a half, and I can't believe that you guys aren't going to wind up with some sort of crunch. If we can't support it later on, as long as everybody knows that if somebody gets backfilled after these folks are hired, that's the person who's at risk. At least as I
Correct.
understand the contract.
Yes. Yeah, so if we were to hire 4 firefighters, and then over the next 3 years, we had retirees and we hired people to replace them, it would be the last hired, first fired, just like you described, Don.
Well, I'm willing to take a flyer on it myself.
Julie?
Yeah, I feel similarly. I mean, it's a great opportunity to have 4 more people with the grant. But I hesitate if something happens in the long run and we can't fund it going forward. And yet I hate to lose all that training. So I'm good with it, but it's a chance we take, I guess.
I'm struggling with it, given our current budget situation and what we've been hearing in the last budget and what I anticipate that we're gonna be hearing tonight, and the large increase on our budget. Any amount of money spending and what we're taking away from others, and as we get into it tonight, I know some are gonna try and restore more of their budgets. It's a tough decision. I would echo Don's comments, and I think it's a great opportunity, and I think it's forward-thinking. You are, the comments about housing, comments on where people are gonna be coming from, comments on, as certain class of firefighters retires, the younger guys not taking the overtime the way the last ones did, all makes perfect sense to me. But looking at this year's budget, and then the added cost for this, and then looking out, and even hiring somebody with the thought that we might have to lay them off and redo 2015 I'm struggling with it. Mark, I did tell you had to get up, but looking at the agenda and where this falls, you are welcome to sit back in your chair as Finance Committee and discuss this, or you could just talk about it as a resident.
Okay, Mark Kelleher, I am going to speak as a resident. And for the firemen here, I know you guys, both good people. I come from son of a Boston firefighter, 30 years as an engineer on the fireboats. My uncle was at the busiest station on Columbus Avenue in Roxbury. Went to many fires with my father to watch him work. So I'm very partial to firemen. And I do agree with the deputy's chief contention that right now, and correct me afterwards if I'm wrong, that when you have an ambulance call, 3 guys have to go to the hospital or whatever, 3 guys go out, and you have 1 guy left at the fire station. I think that's a bad situation. 1 guy can do very little, it's dangerous. So in that sense, I support your petition for the grant. But then 4 years from now, we've got a $600,000, roughly figure, $600,000 bill. And, what's really fueling the budget increases are, retirement this year, $262, and health insurance, $337. It's going to be more than that. And then you look at the budgets for the public safety, and not without cause, they keep going up, and all the other budgets level funded. So, and overtime is a major factor. I did some surveying, and I've shared this with you guys when I ran for office, is 3-man crews are kind of commonplace on the Cape. Provincetown Truro runs 2-man crews. Wareham, 2-man crews. Plymouth, I spoke to the chief there. 80% of the calls are BLS, basic life safety. 20% are ALS, advanced life safety, and they have a private company that does 2 firefighters on there. In Plymouth, it's 2 personnel. Even where the town administrator came from in Braintree, they've switched to a private company, 2-man crew. Boston EMS, 2-man crew, New York. I even called to the villages down in Florida, elderly population, similar to us, 2-man crew. I mean, and they put a paramedic and an EMT. So, I'm not saying for the board to choose one way or the other, but I think with all the expenses we have coming up, the chairman of the finance committee said in the next 5 years, we've got $500 million to spend, is to look at, and I know it's tough for you guys because you've got a union and everything, to look at the BLS calls, basic life safety. In Plymouth, it's 80%. That would require 2-man people going to the hospital. And with that type of, I can't think of the word, but you could avoid the problem of leaving one guy back at the fire station. I hope you consider that. You guys do a great job. I do want to say, when you watch TV, the only guys out in Ukraine after the bombs are the firemen fighting the fires. So, thank you.
So I'd just like to address Mark's comments real quick. Our BLS calls, we do transport with 2 most of the time. The 3-man calls, the reason it's predominantly on the Cape is travel time to the hospital. And while Truro and Provincetown may staff with 2 to the initial call, they usually transport with 3, especially with the length of their transport. And 80% for us is not accurate. We're probably more 75%, probably closer to 80% of our calls are ALS calls. So a lot of that's driven by state protocol. We don't have a say in, they require certain levels of treatment based on the condition of the patient. So those things tend not to be, it's a little bit, and the other big issue is the transport time to the hospital. Plymouth has a hospital in the town of Plymouth. I know Plymouth's a big town, yes, but the transport time is typically shorter than ours is. So just some reasons why there might be some differences around.
John, anyone on your committee is welcome to comment.
Thank you. Mark, Amherst?
No comment.
Dan? Question, do the 3-man crews include the driver?
Yes.
Karen?
I'm just curious if there's a projection for, or is there a rule or something that says, based on the number of people in the town, 13,000 or whatever it is, do we have to carry this many people? And is there a projection of some sort for 4 years from now? If that goes to a different level, we have to add people, incrementally add people versus just replace. And if that was an opportunity of some sort.
Yeah, there's no number out there that says, based on your population, you should have this much staff for EMS or fire department staffing. It's really up to the municipality to decide what type of services that they want to provide.
Yeah, I was looking at that as potential opportunity to not have to, go, I think it's a great opportunity, but I have the same concerns as everybody else about 4 plus.
Angela?
No problem.
Mark, any more questions? All set. Thank you, Chief, and Deputy Chief, for speaking to us. It certainly is a great opportunity to take advantage, great opportunity to take advantage of a grant. But we all know how grants work. They're good in the beginning, but then they wear out, the grants. And just a couple questions. These 4 firefighters for 3 years, is there anything in the language of the grant that says, you hire these 4 folks for 4 years, and then the first year you have a retirement. You don't hire for that retirement, you just backfill with one of these 4, and then keep attritioning that up until the end of 3 years. So we kind of use them like as a backup to the regular staffing of the department, because will these 4 in your staff, what, 33 right now?
32 on shift, 36 total if you count the
36.
deputy and I.
So these would bring it to 39, and then, and you know what I'm trying to say is as people retire, you just keep using up those 4 people.
There is an obligation to keep the personnel that are hired for the duration of the grant. I would have to look at the language to see if the non-grant personnel, if we had trit down, so.
Yeah.
So I would have to look at the language, but I believe what you're saying is correct. We would keep the 4. When somebody retires, they would just move, essentially move up. I think what we talked about is that kind of defeats the purpose of what we're trying to accomplish. So if hiring 4 just to attrit back down to where we are now in 4 years is not the goal of this. I understand the concerns, but the goal is to try and get us to a point where we can not have that one person be alone
Yep.
and maintain that level of
I
staffing.
understand that, but you're fully staffed right now, though, right? I mean, if these 4 don't come on board, you're still fully staffed as far as.
Yeah, we have our full complement of personnel as of right now, yep.
It's just a thought there, because I share the other folks. It's the selectmen's decision on this thing, but the funding becomes an issue, of course, in the years to come. And the startup costs, we're charged with training and uniforms and gear and stuff like that, and that's roughly how much
52, I think.
Around about
Yeah.
52,000
for the 4 years?
for that first year.
For the first year?
for the
only?
first
Yeah,
year,
for their
yeah.
sets of fire gear and their training,
Okay.
their radios.
And actually, but we show the first year is actually a reduction in the budget, because by the time we figured we got them on board, we would run into lower shift strength. So we save some overtime. So we figure it's about a $14,000 savings in that first year.
Okay. That's all I have to say. Thank you very much.
Can I ask one question?
Sure, Mark.
Will the addition, if you have the 4 additional guys, will that reduce your overtime going forward? I think you answered this before, but I forgot how you
So,
answered.
yes, there will be a reduction in overtime. It's where it will be is in callback overtime, and it's kind of difficult to calculate of what the exact number would be. I don't want to say it's an insignificant number, but it's not going to be, 10% of our budget, or, we're running about $1 million in overtime right now. I anticipate it would be less than $50,000, but I really am hesitant to put a number on it, because it's kind of also run-driven. If the busier we are, that number kind of becomes a moving target.
We're all finished, Michael. Thank you.
Don?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We sat in this room last week and we talked to the cemetery administrator about stats that are showing the town aging upwards, and I can't believe that there's not going to be a correlation between that and future runs. I'm willing to at least make a motion to do it, because we know what the downside is. The worst that could possibly happen is we have to terminate people at the end of the 4 years, but at least we'll have them for the 4 years, and we can see if we can try to fund them through something creative.
It's 3 years.
2 years?
My final comment on this is, and you and I kind of spoke about this briefly, and I've been very forthright with the deputy about this, is that I am very concerned about going into this without a plan on how to pay for them by year 4.
Yeah.
The thought, having lived through the override of '05, and both Craig and I ended up stuck on an ambulance by ourselves for run after run after run, and what that did to the department and what it did to this town, I would be very, very, very concerned about, the option being an override in year 4 and us not doing anything in the intervening years to get to that point. So while I appreciate the idea, I would not be in favor of, we'll see what happens when we get there. I would much rather start out with a plan now and figure it out. And if we can't do that, it's a conversation we can keep having until we can do it.
Don?
I would agree, Chief. The only problem that I have with that is, I'm not saying it's preclusive. I mean, we could still come up with a plan, but there's a deadline for submission. Isn't there some way to pull the plug after that? If
If we get awarded the grant, we can refuse it.
Yeah, but if you don't put in for the grant, you can't take it.
They already put in.
We're already in for it.
Okay, so we need to have a plan then. It's that simple. I mean, I'm supportful of them at least pursuing the plan, and seeing what happens.
Joe, any comments?
No, Yes, I would echo what the chief said. We know what we can use the firefighters for. We know what the needs are. What we don't know is how to sustain this in the 4th year.
I can't tell you how much I appreciate you saying what you just said. No greed there at all. And therefore, I would suggest that we don't take a vote on this tonight, and,
Sorry, Selectman Anderson has arrived.
okay. Good evening, Mary. We don't take a vote on this tonight. We're gonna hear from the rest of the department heads tonight, and then Monday, we're gonna have a fairly extensive conversation on the budget and where we end up. And then, I think from that point, if the board thinks that there is a way, and you and I discussed how Dennis did it, which was money year 1, year 2, and year 3, and then it rolled into year 4.
Yep.
Seamlessly, and that makes sense to me. Does this have to be voted by town meeting or no?
I-
The budget has to be voted by
Correct,
town
right.
meeting, so if we took year one and put 100,000 or whatever into year one, that would be voted in the budget.
Correct.
But the positions and everything else don't have to be voted by.
Right, they're not new positions. Firefighter already exists in the classification and compensation plan. The question for town meeting would be the appropriations to support it.
I'm gonna kick the can down the road till after Monday.
I'm all right
And-
with that.
And thank you guys for coming, and thank you for the honesty, chief.
Sure.
Thank you guys,
Absolutely.
appreciate it.
It's
I
a
know-
difficult decision, and it's not, honestly, at this point with no plan, I couldn't vote for supporting something with the thought of laying somebody off. And taking
And
it.
I appreciate that sentiment, because that's not a position I want to be in.
And we're looking at an $80 million budget this year, and that's spending free cash and that's spending ARPA on something else. So, it's a lot of money.
Just a point of personal privilege is, we're on the list of departments tonight. If neither the committee or the board have an issue to discuss with the fire department, we're going to leave and let other people have the time.
Anything for the fire department on your side?
I'm fine. Mark? No. Dan? Karen?
No, that was the one we wanted to talk about, yeah.
Angela? Mark? No, I'm fine. Thank you, chief.
Anything from the board, Don?
No.
Larry?
No, I appreciate that. Our job now is to come up with a plan in a few days then.
Julie?
Nothing, no. Thank
Mary, do you have anything for the fire department tonight?
Just, I'd like to read because it's so easier.
I'm not sure what she said. I think she said thank you.
Heard every third word, yeah.
Something was up with the mic, Mary.
Okay.
Now, that was better.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, we'll jump right into Monomoy Regional School District. Good evening. Good evening. State your names for the record.
I'm Scott Carpenter, the superintendent for Monomoy Regional.
And Michael McMillan, School Business Manager for the district.
Thank you for coming.
Thank you. We have some handouts. Can I
You
pass
can,
these
yes.
round? Okay.
And we don't need to go back through the whole budget?
Are you sure?
Positive?
I was like,
I'd
should
suggest you don't even start.
I prepare an extra long presentation tonight?
Nope.
This is just the updated budget that the school committee voted on, and then a couple of pages.
Okay.
Which we
Thank you.
I've got one.
Okay, perfect. There's a few others.
Oh,
we just
okay.
minded, so
Thank you,
just-
Michael. It's still warm.
Careful.
Yeah.
It's still warm, Michael.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Oh,
Don't smudge the ink.
I'll give Michael a lot of credit. He went and put together these one-pagers this afternoon in the last handful of hours. And I know that, I think last time we were here, Mary was saying, you know, wouldn't it be nice to have, you know, sort of a one-pager? So we wanted to make sure that we had some one-pagers. And yeah, I think questions that I know people might have are, you know, the budget assessment, and then, you know, the ESSER emergency relief funds. So we just wanted to make sure there was a one-pager for each of those.
Thank you. Has this budget changed, Scott, since our last, or Michael, since our last conversation?
The budget has not changed. The assessment changed slightly, just a couple of $100 under the original method, and actually went down further under the new method.
We have Selectman Anderson online and the rest of the board here, and this is Finance Committee, obviously, and I'm gonna just start with Mary. Mary, if you want to, now I don't have to read your statement, you can read it.
Thank you, Michael. I don't know where to start. Obviously, I believe in excellent schools, and I think Monomoy, the district, is excellent, everything I've seen. But I am not of the school of thought that because you believe in education, you never question their budgets. I think schools can be responsible to their budgets like all town departments can. As I pointed out last month, over the last 5 to 6 years, the budget's gone up 20%, while the student population's gone down 8.5%. I'm disappointed with that you couldn't do something to bring the budget down. I think level funding would be fair based on that scenario. Monomoy's budget's close to 40% of the town's total, so it's a major factor in taxes. And last week, we had, I think, half of the departments in to talk to us about their budgets. And a couple of department heads made some pretty compelling arguments for a part-time administrative assistant. I think the two positions together was less than $30,000, but we're not looking at funding it. So I don't know how I can look those two individuals in the face and allow Monomoy to have a close to $700,000 increase with no increase in students. I've managed a lot of budgets in my lifetime. Admittedly, not a school. I don't claim to know anything more about managing schools than what I've observed. But I do know that I have never had a large budget that there wasn't somewhere I could cut. And I may not know where you can cut it, but I think you know where you can cut it. Just me looking at the charts you provided us, the new ad chart added up to almost $350,000. Probably all great things, but so are those two positions that two department heads spoke so eloquently about. And another one is the teacher-pupil ratios. I think your chart showed that the max was 21 for middle and high and 19 for elementary. I don't know, are we there everywhere? Is there somewhere we can do some combining? So I'm very discouraged, and I cannot support a $680,000 increase in the budget.
Thank you, Mary. I'm gonna go down the line to board members, and then if you wanna respond after that, before we get on to finance committee, or just take notes and respond all at once. Julie?
So, thank you for these are really helpful. I did have some questions on the ESSER funding, and I see the breakdown, which is very helpful. One thing I noticed, though, looking into some of these funds and looking at the breakout here, so understanding the facilities of $132,434, how would you break that up? Where would those monies go to in terms of facilities?
So, I think I'll go on the exact details shortly, but it's HVAC repair and maintenance, so it's upgrading our HVAC and all our buildings, getting them into good work. I mean, they're in pretty good working condition anyway, but, you know, there's some pieces that are, like, some mini splits at the elementary school, at the middle school, which need replacing, and that's the bulk of it. We also are in the process of purchasing some new cleaning equipment for the buildings, and that was part of the drive around COVID as well, to improve cleaning and support the custodians that way. And we do also have in there, I can't remember if it's under facilities, I just wanted to check, but we are looking to purchase a new van to replace one of the vehicles we use for student transportation in the school. So I'm trying to focus ESSER funds as much as we can on one-off costs. You know, I mean, in reality they do need to be repeated, but in theory you can purchase once and it's not adding a burden to our operating budget. So that's where the focus has been.
And I'm asking this question in general in terms of ARPA funds. I know we can spend, we have a certain amount of years that we have to spend those funds.
Yeah.
Do you have to spend a certain increment each year?
No.
You do?
Oh.
No.
We have to spend it, there's only
Certain
a
window.
finite timeline to spend it all by.
Okay. So, but you're not
Yeah,
bound to spend a certain amount,
No,
for
like
each
so we
fiscal
have to
year.
spend, there's 3 parts to the ESSER funds. There is ESSER 1, which has to be all spent by this September. ESSER 2, which is September of 23, so that's 6 year, and ESSER 3, which is September of 24. And ESSER 3 is the bigger one, so, but we'll be spending them concurrently because ESSER 3 is much bigger than, the other two.
And then I guess my only other question really relates to the increased spending on the staffing. Now, I understood that from previously that
Yeah.
that was a couple of teachers
So-
special ed.
So the increase from the FY 22-23 budget, the increase is primarily the percentage contracted cost of living increases. So we have 2.5% increase on our contracts from this year till next year. We are hiring one extra position for special education. However, we are reducing one grade 4 position. So that's
A
you know,
wash kind of.
wash. Yeah, exactly. We are hoping to add a half-time custodian at the middle school because they just need extra support there at the middle school, particularly with all the additional cleaning requirements now.
So I guess my only other question is, because, I appreciate Mary's comments. I also understand that, there are different things in budgets that we're dealing with in terms of even talking about air quality and COVID and related items. But I guess, without compromising anyone's safety, my only question there would be, is there any way, and I assume if you're spending the money on air quality, then it's an issue, but if there wasn't a huge issue there, is there any way to save those funds and use them for '24? Because you're looking at like roughly 700,000, is it, for the replacement of, is it the middle school roof?
Right, well, so we have middle school roof and elementary school roof that we're talking about will need to replace, and we, at some point in the near future, so it's the middle school roof that Harwich would have.
Right.
Would have a piece of that, and, so we're in the process of getting, applying for the state, funding, to the school SB, School Building Authority, to get a grant to help support and offset that, and have some design studies that are built into the budget for that, for that project. But, we also have to keep in mind that I think thankfully, compared to last time that we were here, it's like the masks are off, and we are in a lot better place with COVID. But I think also we need to make sure that we've got that HVAC system so that it is, I think one of the things that we did right as a district in this is we had very functional HVAC systems and have been able to keep them up. So this has been, just providing additional maintenance to make sure that we have maximum airflow to keep the kids and the staff in the buildings and not sick.
Thank you. I don't have anything right now.
Larry?
Yeah, thanks for attending again. We've gone through this several times. And a point I apparently have missed in each of your discussions, so I want to bring it up again. And that is the difference between the total budget of the 42.8 and the assessed budget.
Yeah.
And very simply, is that revenue coming into from the state that reduces the assessment? I don't want to go through all the foundation stuff you go through.
Yeah.
Just that's money coming in from the state is the reason for that difference?
It's two things. It's, yes, the money coming from the state went up $300,000-ish, so that helped reduce the assessments. And then how the assessment is split between the two towns.
But I'm talking about the total assessment on this one.
Yeah, so yes, then it's just the revenue.
Just revenue coming in
Yep.
from the state. And did I hear you right that this budget presents a 2.5% salary increase?
Yep.
Okay, that's all I have.
Don?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through the years, I've been kind of clear on this. If I were rank ordering anything, excellence in education doesn't boil down to how terrific your overhead people are, central office people. In point of fact, doesn't even necessarily correlate to how much equipment you've got. It really boils down to excellent instruction. So in my priority, you'd be taking care of debt service first, somebody who's in front of a student second, and you work your way down. Through the years, I've been very frustrated about getting at, because the FTE was kind of sprinkled across platforms, about just how much overhead you were carrying in the entire system. Because you've had job titles which really aren't sourced in one spot in a budget. And until I know that, I'm where Mary is like, we're in trouble, and we really need some help. There's absolutely no guarantee that Chatham is going to, fall in line and say, yeah, we want to fund more of what happens in the school, in which case this is a runaway train by next year. So I'm really not in favor of where we are right now.
So I guess you left here, Mary said, her words stuck with me the most, sharpen your pencil. I'm a strong supporter of the school system. I can't support this budget and won't support this budget. So if it comes down to a vote tonight, you now have 2 no's. And we are gonna bring that to a board vote next week on Monday night. So we're gonna vote yes or no next Monday night. We're looking at a, prior to tonight, 6.65% increase overall in budget, $5 million. That didn't include our COLA. So if we add our COLA estimate of $750,000 into that, we're up to $5.682 million. And $679,000 from the school, without any cuts from the initial budget, makes absolutely no sense to me. When I have department heads asking to restore $4,000 for programs that make people happy at the community center. And constantly, every year for the past 7 years, we are cutting things from our department heads and trying to make a budget work. And I think our department heads are getting tired of us cutting their budgets and your budget coming in as high as it is. So I personally need to see some cuts before I would even consider supporting this. The special needs program person that you're getting, you absolutely need that, and I wouldn't suggest you cut that, or I wouldn't support your budget either. Clearly, that's a needed position with the amount of students with needs coming into our district. But Scott, I do support your school. This is the town I've lived in my entire life. I would love to just have the money, but it's 80 million this year, 83 or 84 million next year, 87 million the year after that, and we are pushing people out of this town as fast as we can. Certainly, the school district is bringing people in because we have a strong school system. We have great fire department, great police department, great community center. We have a lot of great programs. But when does it stop? We're making it so people aren't going to be able to live here. Therefore, I'm asking you to go sharpen your pencil and figure out where we can take off. The other thing that strikes me is capital on the elementary school. We're not doing any capital improvements on the Harwich Elementary School this year, but we are doing capital improvements on the Chatham Elementary School this year.
Well, for FY23, we are submitting an application to the Massachusetts School Building Authority to replace a roof at Chatham Elementary School and at the middle school. So, if both of those applications are accepted, then we'd do the feasibility study for those roofs probably next year, and probably into the year after that we'd actually start to do the construction.
So given that we're going back to potentially, and I wouldn't say potentially, because it either passes both town meetings or Harwich is gonna have to go to the next step and try and get some leveling on the costs of the elementary school. So I would hope that we weren't gonna do any capital work at the Chatham Elementary School this year, or 2023, given that we're gonna go through the exercise to branch off elementary schools.
Well, so if the vote goes through in the spring, that will take effect in next year's budget. So, and then under the changes to the regional agreement, each town pays for the capital of its own building and the operating. So, assuming everything goes swimmingly and it passes both town meetings, then in FY23, Chatham would be paying for Chatham Elementary School operating and capital.
But what happens if it doesn't?
Well,
And I'm only speaking
No,
right now, I'm
absolutely.
not talking about the 660,000,
yeah,
680 that we may get back. You guys are a bit more optimistic than I am. I'm sure Harwich will vote yes.
yeah,
So you're a bit more optimistic than I am.
yeah.
But we as a town, we can't count on that money this year. It'd be great if it all worked the way you're saying it's gonna work.
Yeah,
But if it doesn't, it would be very irresponsible for us to go to town meeting on May 2nd and say, we're almost there, we're gonna get this money. So I'm not counting on it.
Well, I think we're optimistic, and even today, we got the last little thing worked out with DESI, so that even DESI's behind the agreement as, as drafted. So we have, we just have little.
Chatham voters. I'm not worried about
And-
Harwich voters.
yeah,
I'm
and
really
again,
not worried about
again,
this.
I think the boards in the town support and definitely understand why, why that change in the regional agreement's important. I know that, many in the town want to see that regional agreement change because they want to make sure that they can keep sustaining that, Chatham Elementary School. It's important to that town, and I think you'll see the support there.
It's important to a group, for sure, but so is the senior center, Scott. Like I said, I'm not hanging my hat on it right now. After their meeting, which is May 8th or whatever, then we can have the conversation again. I'll turn it over to John.
Thank you, Michael. Mark Amherst, any?
No questions.
Dan?
Yeah, a few comments. I know that education budgets contain monies for special needs kids, for kids with IEPs. And if it's in the IEP, then you gotta fund it, you have no choice. So beyond that, you have flexibility to economize, look for ways to avoid spending money. I'm kind of agreeing with what Mary had to say earlier, and that is, there's always opportunities to avoid spending money. It's a question of biting the bullet. I don't think the town can afford continuing 4 or 5% increases in not just the school, but town operations as well. It may be that we need to sit down and think about a strategy on how we can better control costs. That's it.
Karen?
I'm just wondering if that was the action that came out of the last meeting, did you guys look at this line item by line item to see where there was opportunity and didn't find it? Is that why it didn't come down?
Well, I think we went through that exercise prior to moving the budget forward to, with the school committee. So there are needs that were identified that weren't funded in this iteration. So the school committee felt that this was an appropriate budget that, and again, the mantra that I've always had is, we want to provide the best education possible, but we also want to be great fiscal stewards of the taxpayer's dollar. And it's it's definitely a balancing act there. And, it's one, I appreciate the sentiment, Dan, that, you can, we could go in and say, let's cut this or that. And, we're in a very unique competitive landscape here in Cape Cod. I know that Mark was just chatting with me before the meeting. Cut one thing, potentially lose $15,000 to a child that chooses a charter school over our middle school. And that's this balancing act. I think one of the things I'm proud of, and I think both towns can be very proud of, is that in the last 9 years, we've seen the kids come home. That they're not running off to Lighthouse like they used to. They're not running off to Nauset or DY. In fact, I think we're seeing more families want to be here because of the program that's available. And again, it's that balancing act between trying to make sure we've got a strong program and and not do away with something, wanting to save money and seeing it actually hemorrhage money to another school district.
Yeah, I guess I look at 40+ million and say we should be able to find something similar to Mary's take, so I think we ought to look at it again and try and find something. Because I agree, like last week when we heard from the department heads on the cemetery lead and all that stuff touched me a lot, and I guess, we're talking a few $1,000 and we can't help them out, but here we have to be able to find something, even the smallest amount would help us make some of those decisions too.
Okay. Angela?
I think that's correct. what you just said. I think you've got to go back through all of these and find what you can save, because otherwise, what you're hearing is there's going to be a no vote. So what can you find if a little out of everything? A lot of it might be just repairing things. Don't do it this year or next year, you know, that kind of thing. But I think it's important. This year is very difficult for us to deal with, particularly with what's going on. And we don't know what to tell you to do. You don't. You don't. Thank you.
Okay, Mark?
Sure. It's like you made a good faith effort and cut X dollars. If both towns vote in favor of, you know, redoing the adjustment, will the money that you cut be reinstated back to your budget? So in fact, you will not, the bottom line, you will not have a cut? Do you understand what I'm saying?
Yeah, so if the changes to the regional agreement are approved,
By both towns.
so,
And prior to that, you've made some cuts.
yeah, then.
Will that money then flow back to you, so in essence, you will have the budget you came in?
So the answer is no. So at least we've provided some draft motions of what at town meeting, so you sort of vote a budget for the school district that breaks out as an assessment, so it's, so if the change happens, it's if we reduce money now, it doesn't come back to us. That's not the way
Yeah.
the votes are at least drafted or set up.
Yeah, essentially, they were voting one budget. The budget is set. What we're trying to agree is how the budget is split between the two towns. That's what might change, but the top number wouldn't change the way it's currently structured.
Mark? Thank you, Dr. Carpenter and Michael for coming in here and speaking to us. There isn't much that hasn't been already said, but just a couple things. The operating budget is up over roughly about $930,000 over fiscal '22. How much of that is fixed costs that, you have really no controls over? You've got salary increases, you've got health benefits, you've got pension benefits. Those are fixed costs. You really haven't got much leeway there in costs. And so the next thing you look at is where you do have flexibility, is programs and equipment and things like that. So I'd be curious to see if you had a number or a quick, of the 930, how much is fixed costs or uncontrollable costs?
So of that increase, vast majority is just things, that we only have indirect control over, so like staffing, cost of living increases, because it's not due to new hires, health insurance increases, retirement. The one piece, I guess, so we have $260,000 roughly for budget priority requests from principals. But, it's not, yes, it's it's not like we can't live without them, though. It's things like equipment for high school courses and textbooks and reading materials for students. So
I'm just looking at the fixed costs where you don't have, salaries go up. You've got contracts, you've got to pay that, whatever your percentage increase. You've got health insurance. Our health insurance has gone up, I think 5-6%. Those are fixed. How much of that 930,000
I would say 260,000
are fixed costs?
are not fixed.
Are not fixed.
Are not fixed. The rest. So 680,000 are staffing increases, or salary increases. Yeah.
So it's not like you can cut those.
Yeah.
It's a mandate. So you've only got 230,000 left. To cut, and then you're level funded. Because the other three buckets, transportation, capital, and debt, they're all down, opposed to FY '22. And then the last question I have, and I'm surprised you didn't ask it, Michael. That's a favorite. That's your. Well, E and D maybe. Okay. No, it's your perennial favorite. That's all I have to say. And Michael, have closing comments.
And that's all I was gonna end with. Your 1.8 million in E and D. Your budget increase to us is the high sixes, and I think the message is pretty clear and pretty uniform. I think everybody at these tables supports the school, has supported the school. I think the taxpayers have supported the school. We don't want to hurt the kids, but we can't afford these increases every year, and especially this year. Some of the services that we cannot do without, we have in our budget this year, and we may be forced to cut some of those. But we're forced with, we haven't got into our cuts yet, but we're gonna vote, now we're gonna be voting on what you're calling your final budget, so I would ask that you look deep and try and make this work for the town.
Can I just say one last thing? I have attended a couple, three of your school committee meetings in person, you know, and I try to learn as much about it as I can. For me, it was in and itself another language to learn, municipal finance, and then school budgets and the terminology and stuff. And I have attended it. I've seen the teachers and your principals, you know, going back and forth. I forget that one meeting where you had nothing but principals and it was very enlightening to see that. So, and then on E&D, one last thing. Is there a limit that you want to stay at? I mean, you got 1.8. Is that a comfortable, I mean, it looks like a big number, but is that a good number that helps you throughout the year?
So, I mean, good question. It's not something that helps us throughout the year, so we have to, we have to state how much we're going to use out of it, so essentially, when we develop the assessment that you see, there's an amount of E&D that we use that's in that, that's one of the drivers of that number, so it kind of gets laid out there in a budget season, and we don't get to touch E&D until that next budget season. So it's not something that we have as money that we can go to during the year. It's money that we budget for, and we it's kind of interesting because when I came here 9 years ago as a new school district, we had no excess and deficiency, and so one of the goals of myself, the business manager at the time, and the school committee was to build that reserve to help smooth out challenging fiscal years for the school districts and the towns. So we just, we try to use it to make sure that we're never facing towns and schools, some fiscal cliff, so if you theoretically were to dump all of your excess and deficiency into a budget one year, you're facing a huge fiscal cliff the following year. You're just kicking the can down the road. So we have gone back year to year and looked at what we can do, and sometimes we have looked at can we use some of those funds to help offset future big purchases like the LA program that we had. So I do think that we can take the feedback from the committee back to our committee. I think we have to also recognize sort of public meeting law and timelines and everything. So, so we can't even schedule a meeting with our finance subgroup of the school committee before the selectmen next meet. But we can get one on the books and potentially meet with them before our school committee on Thursday, and potentially have a conversation. The conversation continue on, but we can take back that feedback. I think you do bring up a good point, John. We have there's only a small piece of a school district's budget that you ever have is truly sort of flexible. It's so much of it. It's like it's personnel costs. Yeah. And and it's the choice is either you say, okay, I'm not going to run that program, right, or and you don't run that program in an environment where families get to choose where they go. Not running that program, maybe I've cut $100,000 over there, and I just created a situation where $250,000 went that direction, which was a net shot yourself in the foot. So so it is this balancing act. Excess and deficiency is a place that we can go and look at. And again, it's what how can we use that to smooth things? I mean, that's really why I've looked at, can we create, get the account, build that account so that we can help smooth things out year to year, budget to budget. So that's a place that we can go. We can also go back and look at these principal ads, that, the things, that are textbooks. And again, it's like if you say, okay, we're not going to fund those textbooks, it's kicking the can down the road. I don't necessarily think that's great for education or, great fiscally, but I think we can look at the list again and see where is there flexibility.
Thank you.
Hey, just to add on the excess and deficiency, I mean, because this is an issue you've raised in the past, and we have increased the amount of money we are using from excess and deficiency, and that's why the amount is going down, because we have started to chip away at that. And there's a finite life to how long you can do that for, because once you've used it up, it's gone. So, and our auditors, I mean, they weren't concerned, but they did say, you got to be careful if you keep using excess and deficiency, you're going to end up hitting that fiscal cliff. And one other thing I would just say is that, there is inflation to think about as well. So although the percentage increase has been, you can look at it, that doesn't take into account inflation, which we are very aware of looking into next year where that's going to go and that's going to affect. But I mean, I know that's going to affect you guys just as much as us, but just so it's...
Don, and then I'm going to wrap this up because we have other department heads and it's St. Patrick's Day and I know some people want to be out of here. Don, go ahead.
I know my beer's turning green. Working off of what you just said, I mean, part of what we do, all of us, we're in a public meeting, is represent the public, but the public really needs to probably fully understand things. I'm not looking upon the labor even as a snapshot. It's a continuum. It has to do with actions that are taken, both who you staff and where you put them, but also contracts. So just for the sake of the public understanding where you are, your labor contracts, how many years are still left in them and at what percent?
So we're just coming in, so 23 will be the second year of a 3-year contract for most of them. And so we're going 2.5% going into 23.
So they're all 2.5 until it expires?
No, they're 2.5 this year, and then it's different by the 2.5 or 2.75 going into 24.
My point being is that we have to look down the road because once you do negotiate, that is a fixed cost. The only alternative basically is to staff differently because you've already locked in the rates. The only other thing that could vary is you might get a churn because of a retirement or a departure, and you might be able to hire at a slightly lower entry level.
It's getting harder and harder.
Yeah, get it.
I'm going to hold off on voting the budget tonight. It's on the bottom line. We're not going to vote it tonight. More than likely, we won't vote it Monday night either, and we'll wait to hear back from them.
Awesome. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Michael. Thank you, Dr. Carpenter.
Channel 18, I know it's on the list tonight, but I believe Joe, oh, she's here.
Huh?
Welcome, Jamie.
That side of the screen.
I'm here, don't forget about me.
Welcome, Jamie. I never look at the
This
screen,
is a real
sorry.
shock.
Me neither.
Any comments you want to make to start, Jamie, or?
No,
answer.
just that I'm under budget this year. I did move some money around to reflect my actual spending, so some line items just look a little different from last year's fiscal budget, but that's about it.
And so there's really nothing for you to defend tonight.
No, nothing to defend, no.
John, do you want to start this? Do you have any questions?
I'll start with Mark down the end.
No questions.
Dan?
No questions.
Carol? Carol, excuse me, Karen?
Just wait until you say my name.
Sorry about that.
I'm just joking. No, I don't have any questions.
No questions. Nope, I think you do a great job, Jamie. I'm having a tough time with names right now.
Whoever you are.
Jamie, nope, you do a great job running these meetings, running the technology, and I do want to make it known that most of Jamie's budgets, Joe, correct me if I'm wrong, all of her budgets come out of the PEG account, right?
Correct.
Correct, which is a surcharge on the cable bills that everybody pays that has cable, so it's a self-funding department to that extent a little bit. So, thank you, Jamie.
Don?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Well, Jamie already knows this. There's nothing better than an informed community. They provide a valued service, and as John points out, the subsidy is coming from the cable bills. So keep doing a great job.
Larry?
Nothing to add to that, Jamie. You look good on the screen, though.
Julie?
Yeah, thank you. Sorry I'm not there tonight, but I've had enough Griffin Room time this week.
No, I don't have any questions, and thank you, Jamie, for all you do. Appreciate it.
Take the rest of the night off, Jamie. Thank you.
You know it.
Thank you. Council on Aging. Good evening.
Good evening. If I could request to go as fast as Jamie, that'd be great. I have a feeling mine will have more discussion, but I'm open to it.
I'm not sure. I'm gonna let John roll with this one too. You wanna start on this? Your position is supported by the administrator and so far it's supported by the board, so.
Yeah, I guess it's the only questions that I had, and we've talked about it briefly, was that you're one of the 3 departments that's adding a full-time head this year. If you could explain, what that position will be doing, how it will supplement what you're already doing there at the Council on Aging. And I think, and maybe if during the pandemic, and how you were affected by the pandemic, with your aging population and stuff. And then the supplemental food program, which I think is part of your budget increase too, right? Okay, so that's, other than that, you do a great job there. I mean, we are an aging population, and your services are in demand and are escalating up. So it's basically the full-time head piece and the supplemental budget food program.
Thank you, John.
Yeah.
So yes, I know it's not news to anyone at these tables that we are an aging community. Just about 50% of our full-time year-round population is age 60 plus, and that's who we serve per mission and per our enabling statute. Within that group, the 75 plus and 85 plus category is the fastest growing in terms of proportion and numbers. So just in the last 10 years, we went from about 35% of the population to 50% of the population, and that continues to grow. We're seeing folks with more needs than we have ever before, often co-occurring mental, physical, and health needs, and just desire to be engaged in the community. So we do need more resources to meet those needs. I'll address the nutrition one first. I think that one's pretty easy. We do operate a nutrition program through the Council on Aging. We serve meals 5 days a week. Pre-pandemic, that was always on-site congregate meals. With the start of the pandemic, we transitioned immediately to meal distribution, and we increased our capacity pretty quickly to 70 meals per day versus about 40 to 45 pre-pandemic. And we were able to do that because we had supplemental funds available from FEMA and from CARES Act. So we did that for about 18 months, and that was a very staff labor and volunteer labor intensive program. And then this past fall, kind of in tandem, we lost that supplemental funding, and we saw case counts improving. So we brought on-site meals back, and we reverted back to that 40 to 45 meal per day capacity, which is supported by our operating budget. But after running a program for 18 months where we were consistently serving 70 people a day and running a wait list, every day of that program we ran a wait list, we can see that there's an unmet nutrition need. So the supplemental funding would bring us back to that 70 meal per day capacity that we ran for 18 months and help us meet that need, because I think we're well positioned to do it, and it's not being met by other community or private resources. So that's sort of the root of that request. And then the staff position is a program specialist too. It's a position that exists within the Harwich Employees Association classification, and it would primarily have a dual role of program coordination and volunteer coordination. And those are 2 roles that they don't have dedicated staff support for right now. On the programming side, of course, we run a breadth of programs, but they lack some intentionality behind them. So this person would engage in more comprehensive assessment of community needs and interests, actively recruit vendors or instructors who could meet those needs, and then formally assess whether the program is successful. And that kind of formality is something we're lacking and is a disservice relative to other councils on aging, our peers across the Cape. I do want to point out evidence-based programs are also something we're lacking in. Those are things like chronic disease self-management, caregiver resiliency, balance, fall prevention. And those are things that require more upfront input and engagement from the department, and we just don't have the staff capacity to do them. So this would help kind of ameliorate that problem. And then in terms of the volunteer coordination piece, I hope you've heard me say on many occasions how grateful I am to our volunteer base. We work with over 100 volunteers across our programs and services. They do the work of about 3.5 full-time equivalent employees. But this is another area we're lacking some of that intentionality in terms of identifying needs that can be appropriately met with volunteer support, and then recruiting the appropriate people to do it, training them, overseeing that work. So this would provide that dual role. So I think that's really valuable, and I think it would be wrong of me not to acknowledge that I think there's sort of a compounding positive effect of the position in building capacity in the department. Right now I see a lot of funding available for aging services, like grant-type funding at the local, regional, state, and federal levels. But it's not something we've really had the ability to access, again, because of capacity. So adding that person builds some capacity so we can take advantage of these other resources that are out there. So that's sort of my approach and the reason I've targeted those functions.
And just one follow-up on the food aspect of your program. Of the 15 towns, we're fairly unique, right, in having a town chef?
We're probably about 50% on the Cape have something similar. Sometimes it's a town chef on site, sometimes they contract for it. But we are unique in a town chef, I would say. I'd also say a lot more towns are considering that approach and going that route because they see the benefit of having that sort of internal management and control to provide those services.
And do all the towns have town nurses too, or is that a somewhat unique position too for Harwich?
I would say that's similarly, probably we were pioneering that, but more towns are going in that direction. A lot of towns still provide public health nursing, but through contract. A number of towns contract specifically with VNA for those services. I would say the level and scope of service provided by a town nurse just so far exceeds what you can access through contracting. Usually, you know, a contract is there's this very well delineated service. That service has a dollar amount attached to it, and that's billed against the contract. Whereas the town nurse can provide sort of that comprehensive, continuous care to the residents. So,
Thank you, Emily. Mark?
No questions.
Oh, okay. Dan?
Thank you for the explanation on what the program specialist is going to do, because I was not aware of those kinds of assignments. So thank you.
Karen?
Who does this work now? I know it's not to the extent that it could be. But
I do a lot of it, and our social services coordinator does a good chunk of it as well, especially the service-oriented volunteer roles. So largely split between the two of us, I would say.
Okay, thank you.
Angela?
No question.
Mark?
You do a great job. Maybe for the benefit of the people at home, what's the difference between Meals on Wheels and what you offer?
Sure. So Meals on Wheels is a program coordinated by Elder Services of Cape Cod and the Islands. So they are the regional aging services access provider. They provide that service in all 15 Cape towns. So it's something that residents apply for and qualify for through Elder Services. There are some criteria, eligibility criteria, some income-based criteria for participating in that program, and then those are, you know, delivered through Elder Services staff and volunteers. So we do, you know, work closely with Elder Services. We work hard not to duplicate services with Meals on Wheels, but they do operate right out of the community center kitchen as well.
By the way, she makes great meals, I see them. My question is, let me just get it together in my mind. Are there any income requirements for the meals that the town offers?
There is not. No, it is open to anyone.
Anybody can go?
Yes.
Okay. Awesome. You do, again, I'll repeat. Great job.
Thank you.
Well done, Mike. Thank you.
Mary? I won't forget you this time. I saved
Well,
Jamie from your comments.
My computer went crazy for a while, so I wasn't even here. So no questions for you, Emily. I think it's amazing what you and your staff and volunteers do. And in answer to that last question, I think one of the biggest pieces about the meals that you do in-house is it helps with social isolation, which is so big with seniors. We see that at the pantry. And I just think that's very important. So I have no questions.
Thank you, Mary. Julie?
I don't have any questions. You do a phenomenal job, and you have an increasing population, so I appreciate it, and I know you need the help.
Thank you.
Larry?
I agree with all that, of course, Emily, but listening to it, and as Mary has said and others, unfortunately, we're not only getting older, we're getting more health, more stress, mental. All you have to do is read the papers. And so the program, the meals for socialization you talk about, we can never do enough. And in the link you provide, by the way, with the other health centers as well as possible. It's not a standalone process. It's connecting to everyone else, which is vital as well. So good job.
Don?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm going to pile on. You do a terrific job. I agree. And you do it with not all that much in the way of resources. So tip my hat to you. Terrific.
Great job, no questions.
Great. Thank you very much.
Was not as quick as Jamie, but pretty
Not
quick.
bad. Thank you, thank you.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Chairman of the Board of Directors, Richard Wastewater, could not be here tonight. I'm the vice chair, and I'm here to thank you all for your support of the Council on Aging and of Emily's efforts and the Board of Volunteers. We're the only town department that runs on volunteer support. So, you know, I want to thank you for your support of our efforts. Okay?
Thank you for coming.
Love drought.
If I may add to her comment, I'm not sure how other towns do, but we survive by volunteers across the board. We couldn't operate, so that's a nice comment.
John Rendon. You're up. You're up. And you are asking for something, so we'll start with you.
I am asking for something. That's why I've waited. Good evening, John Rendon, Harbor Master, and appreciate the opportunity to come before you. And what I'm looking for is an additional seasonal assistant harbor master. It's a seasonal position. It would add $11,750 to our operating budget. And if I can, just briefly kind of explain where we're at as a department. Our current staffing level within the Harbor Master Department is 4 full-time staff and 3 seasonal positions. That's what we currently have. Of the 4 full-time positions, 1 is an administrative position, Michelle Morris, who does all of our permitting, does a heck of a lot of work and does a great job. And then 1 is also really dedicated to facility maintenance, and that would be Tom Telesmatic. And I mention that because while they're critical to what we do, they're not necessarily boat operators. So with this minimal staffing level, our department maintains a 24/7 recall status throughout the year. Me and myself and Bill Neeser, my deputy, we are always, one of us is available on call in case there's a maritime emergency. Obviously, most of our cases are throughout the summer. We average 50 to 60 cases a year. But we're on call. In addition to a maritime emergency, our other core duties are enforcement of Mass General Law and bylaw waterways regulations. So we're out there enforcing our waterways and our facilities. We obviously manage our 215 slip municipal marina. We manage all our town moorings. We have approximately 650 moorings throughout the town in a number of different mooring fields. We're in charge of aids to navigation, all our local aids to navigations that mark our channels. We set them, we maintain them, we haul them seasonally. We operate all our pump out facilities. That's a big job. People don't understand that, but boat waste takes an enormous amount of our time. We have a shoreside facility, but we also operate pump-out carts, and we operate 2 vessels that go out and do pump-outs on vessels. We don't charge for it. We are supported by the grant program, Clean Vessel Act program, so we get reimbursed for 75% of what we spend in that regard. But it's time and it's man-hours to manage it. Obviously, we administer all the slip, mooring, offloading permits throughout the department. We're in charge of facility maintenance on all our waterfront infrastructure, and we put an enormous amount of time in coordination of permitting and scheduling of dredging our channels. And in addition, on top of that, nourishing our beaches. So our scope of work is significant, and we have 1,000+ boaters that operate from our municipal marina, town docks, commercial fish pier, boat ramps, private marinas, and they're operating in an area that is spread out in Harwich. So obviously, you know, we have our 3 major harbors of Saquatucket, Witchmere, and Allen Harbor, but we also have significant presence on the Herring River, and then we go across town where we have Round Cove and Pleasant Bay on the Atlantic side, where we have presence, where we have moorings, where we have a patrol boat, and we patrol Long Pond. Long Pond, it gets extremely busy in the summer, and we need to have a presence there. So it's hard to do that. Obviously, our department has expanded over the last 4 years. We've increased our marina operation, and yet we haven't added any additional staff whatsoever to try to address that. So, you know, the plus side of that is, you know, since we did our upgrades at the marina, we've generated from the end of FY 2017 to this past FY 21, our revenues has increased about $400,000. So while our operations are increasing, so is our revenue. And you know, we've managed it, but in fairness, in order for us to do a better job and to be present on the waterways, managing our facilities, managing boating safety, and being responsive to the boaters that have increased, I need help. And so I'm looking for one additional seasonal position that would be $11,750 ad.
Thank you, John.
Sure. John?
Don, questions, comments?
No, I haven't.
Larry?
No, I think you've made a good case, John. You know, the Snack Shack was successful. Last year but that added more traffic going in and out, which is good. You know, more fees. The ramp on Round Cove obviously gets more use. Just that the bottom line is, we look like a professional organization now. We should staff it to operate as a professional organization. So I fully support that.
Thanks. Thank you.
Julie?
Yeah, no, I support it, and I imagine you'll have more work with the change over at Round Cove as well, so.
Right,
I have
absolutely.
no problem with that.
Thank you.
Should be able to get 11,500 parking tickets, because
Yeah.
at Round Cove, right? I mean,
Start ticketing at Pleasant Bay.
It's true.
That's what I've said.
Mary?
Just that, here's another department head I won't be able to look in the eye with the Monomoy budget. Yeah, that staff position is needed, as is the conservation assistant and the cemetery assistant. So we got some hard numbers here.
Thank you, Mary. John?
Mark?
Have there been any updates with like dredging fees and the reefs and any of that stuff?
Our dredging fees have increased from the county dredge. You know, you probably have read in the paper, there's been a big change at the county with the structuring of the program, and our prices to dredge increased this year, and they're going to increase again next year. It's still the best best way to go. I mean, they're reasonable in the grand scheme of things compared to, commercial companies, but they're increased, yes.
Dan?
The harbor master probably plays one of the most important roles for a seaside village, to administer all the stuff that you just went through. So I certainly would support $11,000 to get a seasonal employee to help you out doing all that stuff, so.
Thank you.
Karen?
Yeah, me as well. It seems like a no-brainer, but given the circumstances, it's tough. Yeah.
Angela?
Oh, I think they should certainly get another person. But my question is, how does your fees wrap up against the fees of the other places that are on, say, Allen Harbor or whatnot? Not Allen Harbor so much, because wherever there is a company that is selling docks and whatnot, their fee is still significantly higher than yours?
If I understand you correctly, so if we compare what you're gonna pay for a slip at Allen Harbor Marine or Harwich Boatyard, some of the, our slip rates are significantly lower.
Yeah, the reason I was saying is with a small change in your rates, you could come back with your $11,000 for 15 minutes. So I would think that if it's a possibility, because you still probably have, 2 or 3 years of people waiting for slips?
20 years. Yeah, it's
When's the
about 20
last time we increased them?
We just increased them. This year will be the first year of a 8% increase that we just got approved by the board. And the previous rate increase prior to that was when we got our new marina in 2018. So,
Yeah, which is beautiful, yeah.
Anything else, Angela?
No.
Mark?
I'm just saying, get.
I have no problem with the position. How much time does Heinz spend checking the recreational shellfishermen during the summer? And the reason I ask that is, I used to commercially shellfish in Chatham, and they used to, and that was commercial, where they really had to check on the sizes and everything. If it may be better to hire a guy, just a guy to go out and check the recreational shellfishermen and free up Heinz to work more with you. Just a thought with that.
yeah, I mean, he's on the flats every day, either him or his volunteers. He's got a series of volunteers that make that department run. He's a one-man department. And, he helps my department, but we also help him in much of what he does, clearing waterways, selling shellfish permits, setting up the lab, breaking it down. So it's a combined effort. But during the summer, he's running that shellfish lab and he's on the flats. And, I mean, he helps when he can, but he's got his hands full.
Just 2 other suggestions. I'd love going to the snack shack when it wasn't open last year. If you have that big line of open boats to kind of promote that, now that we have for lack of a better word, snack shack, just promote that people could get on there for lunch or breakfast. I think you could, and maybe you fill it up, but when I went down, a few times I went down there, that's a great place to pull up, spend $20, great revenue producer if you have the space. And the other thing is, when I had my kelp grant, Bill Neeser really saved me one time. I called there and I had an accident out there and I couldn't run my engine. And thank God I called the harbor master, he came right out there. And I don't know how many distress calls you get, but if I had got a bill and charged me, say, $100 and say, we do this as a service, and, I don't know what to do, but I would have happily spent the $100. And I don't get Towboat USA because it was a low-cost information. It's just an idea for increased revenue. People who run out of gas, I know you want to maintain goodwill, but I wouldn't see anything wrong with sending them a bill and saying, for our time. Just just a suggestion, because you do a great service, and a lot of the calls are, for lack of a better word, ignorance. Just a thought.
Any other questions? Good program, John. You know, I am a boat owner. I have a slip down there, and it's a great, very well run program. This new staff position, is it a full-time summer position, or is it a part-time summer position?
It'd be 40-hour work seasonal position.
Yeah, okay. And then, like you said, the rate increase, you expect to pull in what, maybe 50, 60,000 with the rate increase, would you say, or?
I would say, gosh, I don't remember the math, 8% increase, so I think it's somewhere in the $75,000 increase range.
Okay. And then we're going to talk about revenues and forecasts later, so we'll save that. Thank you, John.
Sure.
You have my support. We just have a lot to tackle.
Understand.
So,
I appreciate it.
I'm not going to get an answer tonight, but you will get an answer.
Thanks for the time.
Thank you.
Thank you, John.
Thank you.
All right, recreation. Eric's up.
Hi, everybody. Eric Beebe, Recreation Director.
Hey, Eric.
I don't want anything. My budget is 1.4% decrease for this fiscal year. The only other thing I have coming up is a CPC warrant article for $245,500 for 4 more pickleball courts. In addition to that, expansion of our basketball courts. That kind of gets swept away sometimes with the pickleball, but it includes basketball as well. So that, you know, I'm not really asking for anything, but I'm happy to answer anything.
Imagine you'll be out of here as quick as James.
Sounds good.
John,
Chairman? Sorry to deflate that. Eric and I did have a conversation last week, and I'm probably saying the name wrong, but Peter DeBacher? Peter DeBacher came in on behalf of Town Band. It's my understanding they have a line item for their expenses that comes through recreation. And Town Band is looking for an additional $2,500. I gave Peter my standard, no, but we can have it discussed during the budget process.
is that something we normally pay, or is that in addition to what we?
It's usually through aid to programs in our budget, and we normally give them $2,500 a year.
Okay.
So they're asking to double that.
Correct.
Yeah.
So you give them 2,500, they want 5,000.
Yep.
All right, now we'll start with you.
Okay, Eric, thanks for coming in.
Yep.
And level funding your budget. And then, you know, the pickleball courts and the basketball court, of course, is a warrant article, a CPC warrant article. And for full disclosure, too, I do play pickleball there. I think that's, everybody knows that, that's for sure. But I was wondering.
Hey, Ray.
We're happy to raise them, pay them. Do you have any statistical numbers on, because I'm thinking that, and I don't know all your rec programs, but the pickleball is probably the number one participant sport of almost 400. And we're talking about aging population. The bulk of that aging populations are senior citizens. I mean, I know we have one gentleman that's 95 years old, and the average age is probably 70. So that serves the aging population. And then the youth over there. When I'm playing over there at pickleball, I see those basketball courts full all the time with the youth. So your 2 programs are hitting both age demographics, and so I support both. So thank you.
No questions.
No, I don't have any questions.
Karen?
No, thank you.
Dan?
Hi, Eric.
Hey.
Yeah, I have a question for you. I looked at your application, and the company that got the bid was not the lowest bidder. There was another company, Dirtworks.
That hasn't been put out to bid yet. Those were just quotes that we based our ask on. Hasn't gone out to bid. Yeah, yep.
Oh, I was confused then.
Yeah, that hasn't gone out to bid. That's just what we based, that's how we figured out what we were asking for, yeah.
Never mind.
Okay.
Mark?
There's a little bit of confusion about the pickleball project. Is there additional stuff in that project? Is that additional stuff?
No, the only, it's 4 new pickleball courts, which is the size of 1 tennis court, off the back of the current pickleball courts. And it's, right now, there's 1.5 basketball courts. It's taking our half basketball court and making it a full one. So we'll have 2 full basketball courts.
That's needed, yeah.
And that's the extent of the project.
And I meant to comment on the lighting project.
Oh,
And
yeah.
Joe on the lighting project is finally done over there.
done.
So that's great. And they look good.
Yeah,
Good.
they're great.
Have they sparked them up yet, or by any?
Not yet. We're waiting for final
Okay,
ribbon
thank you.
cutting there.
Julie?
No, I don't have any questions for you, Eric. The only thing I want to know is at some point in life, can we ever ticket at Pleasant Bay? for
Yeah,
parking?
we ticket there. We are allowed to ticket there. We don't write a ton of tickets there, but I think last year we wrote maybe 8 to 10
Oh, really?
total. But, in comparison to somewhere like Red River, where it's, 150 or something like that.
Maybe we could deputize John's crew over at Round.
Sure.
No, I don't have any other questions.
Larry?
No, thank you, Eric. I'm going just to add my support for Peter DeBacker's band, 2,500 to 5,000, because they get minimal expenses, but they would like to do some upgrading and some uniform activity, and they've been around for a long time, and the audience keeps growing. So I would hope we could find another $2,500 in the big budget to help them out.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. You were too quick for me, John. I'm trying to figure out what you had said. Is the elderly population is an aging population? Is that it? Or? That's profound.
And they're aging every day.
That's what I was, well, as long as we're here. Nothing in specific. I mean, it's no secret, and I'll say it again, is like I'm real concerned about the overall trend of relying too much on revolving funds to the extent that there's some constancy in some of the programs. I absolutely believe you need some flexibility, because if you have 7 teams rather than 4 teams, you got to be able to do something.
Sure.
But in general, I'm a big fan of everybody recognizing it's not their program money, it's the town's money, and it gets in line with everybody else to create priorities. So,
I agree.
just as a general thought, it's a major concern, and it remains one.
Thank you, Eric. I have nothing.
Okay. Thank you.
Thanks,
Thanks a
Eric.
lot.
Mary, I forgot you again. Hang on, Eric.
I have nothing. Eric, you're probably our favorite because you came in level funded.
I'll do that every
Even less than level.
They heard that.
Water, wastewater. Good evening, Mayor.
Good evening. So I don't have anything specific, I suppose, to ask for, but I'll go through and highlight some of the larger increases or decreases, and happy to answer any questions. So,
I don't think you need to do that.
all right.
In a matter of time, we'll just go to the finance first, and the board second. If they have any questions, we'll go from there.
John? Mark? No. Dan?
None from me, thank you.
Karen?
No, thanks.
None for me.
No, I fully understand the water and the wastewater, and we are flowing, finally.
They are flowing. We
Okay.
have 2 customers hooked up, and I heard today that we have a small batch, maybe 4 or 5 applications for sewer services, so.
Yeah.
A torrent.
It's,
That's good. Thank you, Dan.
At that rate, how fast will it get to chat?
quite some time. Pumps kick on every few days.
Julie?
I don't have any questions.
Larry?
Nothing on that. My concern remains, in my neighborhood, we're still hoping to get letters.
Yeah, I actually.
The cost keeps going up as we wait.
I have some news on that. I actually reached out to DEP because we've been waiting on the second letter for over 2 months now. And they replied basically saying it's coming. They got lost in the shuffle. Brian Dudley, who worked for DEP, retired in December. Then his replacement was on maternity leave, and the guy that did the inspections apparently didn't get the paperwork back. So now we've nudged them along. I expect it to be coming soon.
Don?
Nothing to say other than, again, terrific job. You're a very trusted department head.
Thank you.
Mary?
No questions. Great job as always, Dan.
Thank you.
So I just say I appreciate your dedication in coming tonight to answer any questions if there was any. I appreciate that. Why don't you take the opportunity to say when you're coming before the board with an update on the revisions to the CWMP and anything else?
Yeah, so I'm hoping to get before the board, I believe the 28th is the last meeting this month. We're hoping to present to the board the input that we've got from the 2 public input sessions and really how we're trying to adjust our trajectory to heed those comments. So that's the plan for the end of this month.
And I thank you for the Board of Selectmen anyway, and John could chime in, but I really appreciate the, how upfront you are and aggressive you are getting prepared for the free money that's coming down the pipe. I know people hate the comment free money, but
If I may,
we may as well get it instead of a bunch of other towns, so.
speaking of free money, Carol and I submitted an application for a sewer relief fund. I think it was back maybe October, and we actually received about $1,000. I think it was $998 as revenue replacement based on that submission. So we did get some
Carol's
revenue
got
in
her
sewer.
thumb up.
We did get some
$1,000
sewer
is
revenue.
Better than no
$1,000.
bucks.
Yeah.
Great.
Great, that's almost 10% of John's new hire. Thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Thanks, Dan.
Youth Committee. Counselor. I didn't have my glasses on. Sorry. Good evening, Sheila.
Good evening, everyone. Mine is just sort of a quick and embarrassing ask, because what happened was during FY '21, when we were asked to freeze everything, my office budget went from like 900 to 135, and then when I submitted my FY '22 budget, I completely forgot to put it back in as 900 again, which it had been for 5 years before the COVID hit. And so I'm just asking for it back with a red face because I should have looked at it more carefully. And also because restrictions have been lifted more, I'm going to be able to do more workshops. I need the money for developing curriculum, buying workbooks. I'm going to need a new printer soon. A lot of things like that. So the money always gets spent. But anyway, that's
So you're looking to go from $135 to $900.
to 900, which it was
Angela will write you a check.
historically.
John? I have no questions, thank you.
Mark, no questions.
Angela?
No question, I'm gonna write her a check.
That's good.
I second that Angela give her the money.
All in favor?
Yeah.
All right, Dan?
No questions.
Mark?
It is 500%.
I know, it's lazy looking on the sheet. It's like, like that.
Don?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Well, since Mark brought this up, a quick flash question. What percentage of 70 million is the $700?
I was trying to think of that.
Angela, it doesn't matter. Angela's going to cover it anyway. He's already promised.
Larry?
None, thank you, Sheila.
Julie?
No, you're a valuable asset, and I attended the thing on the suicide.
That was good.
That was so good, and I really appreciate all the effort that went into that. So important.
Thanks. And we have 2 kickball games coming up with first responders, so I want you guys there too.
As long as Jeff Craig is hoarding the kids.
Yes.
Mary?
No, all set. Great job, Sheila. Thank you for all you do.
Thank you.
Mark?
To answer Don's question, it's 1% of 1% of 1% of 1%.
I knew that. I rounded it just so you can come to that.
You can definitely find that in our paper budget. All right. Thank you very much.
Thanks.
Free cash policy. Why is Carol running? Carol, come on up. Joe, do you want to, nah, never mind. I'll start it. We haven't called on you much tonight.
I am saving my voice and my ammunition.
So the office supplies are in the budget.
Her office supplies are in the budget?
Yes.
It's up
They're
22%,
in
the budget.
Office
Yep.
supplies, yeah.
Yeah, there.
So I can cross that off
You
my
can.
list? Okay,
Angela is set for another year.
taken care.
Good. I just want 5% more.
Carol, I put free cash policy on here to talk about, there's obviously been a lot of conversation about revenue projections. So I thought we would get into the free cash policy, how you came to your numbers, and then, and where we're at now, and then open it up for discussion from the board and finance committee on any changes that they would like to see. So 7 to 8% is what the Board of Selectmen's policy states. We look at the paragraph 2 and tell all of us what paragraph 2 states.
Yeah, so this is a standing policy of the Board of Selectmen. It was established in 2006. I would say that the 7 to 8% figures relate to, and I'll read the sentence. The board will attempt to maintain total certified free cash and stabilization at no less than 7 to 8% of general fund expenditures as of June 30th of each year. If you look at the balance of free cash at the end of June 30th of 2021 and stabilization fund balance at June 30th, 2021, you were at just over 17%. The second paragraph is my interpretation of the policy, it's just mine, in which it talks in part about the use of free, or the sources of free cash, and then it talks about the, some guidance with regard to local receipts and how they're to be estimated. And what it actually says, it's actual local receipts over estimate are the single largest source of free cash. The Board of Selectmen shall attempt to maintain a 10 to 15% margin between estimated and actual local receipts when developing a revenue plan for each coming year. And that is what I used as guidance when I estimated revenue. So what I looked at were the actual FY21 receipts, and I estimated FY23 receipts with a 10 to 15% margin. And then I came to the board and said, I think you have some room to increase your local receipts. And I made a proposal of additional $415,000. And if the board chose to accept that, or, you know, we'll go further with that, at the $415,000, you would be at a 11.46% margin.
Okay. And
If you wanted to get to a 10% margin, you would increase that $415,000 to about $670,000.
so could you just tell us what the current revenue projections are and what last year's revenue was?
With the current FY22,
Yes. Yeah, so 2022 revenue, projection number for 2022.
estimated revenue for 2022, local receipts?
Yes.
Okay. 13,826,772.
And then what's the projected number?
For 22?
23.
23. Before it's adjusted?
No,
Before-
with that adjustment. Not to the 10%, but to the 11.46%.
$13,946,638.
Carol, what page is that you're reading that on, in the budget book, what page?
With the number I just gave you?
Yeah.
Doesn't appear, I just added it together.
Oh, okay.
Okay, but what I was using as my resource is page 88.
88, yeah, okay, that's what I have here, yeah. Thank you.
Okay. So, John, I will start with the Finance Committee.
Yeah, that's been a question of mine, and I think of other folks, it's just the revenue forecasting. And I truly respect the conservative approach and the policy of the board of free cash of 7 to 8%. But these revenue projections here are based on, so you're looking at a margin of what, 11.6% then?
11.46.
And is the 10%, you said 640, but is that just 200 above the 415, or is that an additional
The
640?
670, 600,
Yeah, if you went to 10%,
We went to 10%.
670,000
that'd be the total
increase.
increase.
Correct.
Okay. And, yeah, I fully respect I'm a very conservative person, but I just look at, actuals, it's just my thinking of looking at the actuals of 21, all that we hear in the forecast of a bumper year as far as people, but, it's like grants. We can talk about grant writing, but there's no guarantee you're gonna get the grants. The same thing with revenues. We can think about high revenues, but there's no guarantee we're gonna get them, so I respect your forecast on that, so thank you.
I will tell you that I reached out to every department in the town just to have them review their estimated revenues, and every one of them came back and agreed with the figures that I provided.
Okay, thank you, Carol. You want to go down your?
Oh, excuse me, Mark?
No questions.
Angelo?
I'm very glad that you've went through them all and increased it. Makes sense.
Karen?
I think I'm good. I appreciate the explanation about what happens if we go too high and then don't make it, and that was enough for me. I think I'm comfortable where you're at.
Dan?
Excuse me. Free cash is really just part of fund balance, right?
Correct,
And it's the unencumbered fund balance.
correct.
I know in my previous life, all right, New York school districts, the school district could retain 5% of their prior year's budget as a fund balance. That was, if there was any, was supposed to be applied to the following year's budget. Now, we don't do that here, and I understand why, because free cash is a great mechanism to, fund projects that, where you can't necessarily prescribe any tax money to. But has the town ever considered using unencumbered fund balance to roll it forward and offset next year's budget?
I can tell you that would be part of the policy of the Board of Selectmen, in that the use of free cash is another, and I'm happy to send this to everyone.
Did you get it, John? I think I sent it to you.
The,
Free cash policy? Did you get it?
yeah, I did, yeah. Oh, yeah. And I sent that out to the board.
The
It's-
board has it.
I can read this paragraph itself, if that's helpful. It's the uses of free cash. Free cash should only be used for non-recurring expenditures and is an inappropriate source of funds to support the operating budget of the town. It is the town's goal that the total annual appropriation of free cash for non-recurring expenses should leave a balance, when then added to the stabilization funds, will equal 5% of the general fund expenditures. And then it just says, the board should evaluate projected future year local receipts when setting a level for free cash spending each year.
Gotcha. It's board policy. Yeah, okay.
John?
Mark?
No questions, but thank you for all your hard work.
Don?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I get all that. And Dan, to your point, is if you look at this in the long term, you can't use, because of a policy, the aggregation of the money that goes into free cash on any continuing operations, because that's the
Yeah,
policy.
I mean, that-
The real problem here is where the sweet spot is. Like 25, 30 years ago, people looked really, really, really close at some things that now pretty much sail through because the resistance point isn't that bad anymore. You've got this pot of money and you say, well, I can't spend it on anything but getting something, like a car or whatever. And part of me feels like it's muting arguments that used to occur about what the relative value of certain things are. Do we want to short fund a program in order to get a thing, or do we want to direct it towards the actual production of services with human beings? I'm just concerned that the amounts we've been carrying are high enough where we're not asking the hard questions all the time about the stuff that's being spent, that's being subsidized by free cash.
Yeah, the issue that I have with the non-recurring expenses is that it builds the base. So, you know, the following year, you've got those amounts of unexpended fund balances in the base. Expenditures from the unexpended fund balances. Hey, I mean, if I were the town administrator, I know what I'd be doing in terms of managing the town's operations and the budget.
You all set, Don?
Yeah.
Larry?
Yeah, just to reply to that, that policy came about because some years ago, it helped me out, 2006 or so, we all lived through that. You know, the free cash varies so much per year, and we were using it for operational expenses, and all of a sudden we came up very short. So we decided to keep that steady and you know, protect ourselves from the fluctuations. And so in some ways it was a defensive measure. I agree with what John said. I applaud I like the conservative approach. You know, you found some more revenue, but, you know, free cash is kind of interesting because if you cut it too low to cover the budget this year, then you don't have those resources the following year. So it's a balancing game that we always have a discussion on, and it's an important discussion. So that's what we're talking about.
The reason I have to chuckle to myself is that when we ordered a school district, they didn't follow that policy of rolling over the balance of the unencumbered fund balance. We would ding them.
Well, we need a bigger, no, I won't say that.
Julie?
No, I appreciate the conservative approach, and I guess we should say actually thank God for free cash at times, so I don't have any questions.
Mary?
No question on the free cash, Carol. Just what are you proposing the number would be now for total local receipts? The book has 13.5. With the changes you're talking about, will that bring it up to 14 and some change?
It would bring it up to just under 14, it's just shy of 13,950, 950,000.
Okay.
Unless we went to the 10%.
Pardon me?
Unless we went to the 10%.
Unless you went to the 10%.
Yep.
Yep. And then it would be
That-
14,200,000.
The two areas that looked to me like they were light on that, and I'm with you, Carol, on being conservative, the hotel motel tax where we just upped it from 4 to 6%. It struck me like that could bounce up a little. And the other one was the harbor revenue where we just approved increased rates. So those were the two that to me looked like they could be tweaked a bit.
So the reason why your lodging excise was reduced is because 50% of that goes to stabilization funds, the special purpose stabilization funds that were established at the fall town meeting. One was wastewater, one was affordable housing.
Oh, right,
Yeah.
right. Thank you.
Yeah, and the harbor is one of the adjustments that I have proposed.
Okay, so that, I didn't realize that revenue doesn't even show in there if it goes to another fund. It doesn't count as a local receipt at that point.
No, it's treated, it's treated somewhat, well, it's treated exactly like your current stabilization fund. They're going to have two different names though, and they appear within the trust funds section of the town's financial reports, which you would not see as a budgeted item.
Okay, I'm going to trust you on that, Carol. You're way over my head at that point, but thank you for clarifying it.
So I guess my question.
I'm all set, Michael.
Great. My question to the Board of Selectmen is, what's the appetite to go on a budget like this year with the increase we're looking at going to town meeting with, is going to the 10% number?
My answer is I'm okay this year, 10% to do that. You know, we're still being careful with our free cash.
Don?
Me too.
Julie?
Yeah, I'm okay with that.
Mary?
Yes.
And I'm a yes.
Okay.
Now I'm gonna ask Joe his opinion.
No opinion. Is there any way you could make that a motion, a second, and a vote?
Don's willing to make the motion.
All right. Mr. Chair, I'd like to make a motion that we revert to the 10% reserve figure for this year.
Who's seconded it?
Second.
Go ahead.
Julie
Okay.
seconded it. Roll call vote. Don? Aye. Larry?
Aye.
Julie?
Aye.
Mary?
Aye.
And I'm an aye. Good. All right, that one's done. Julie, I know you're a little time dependent, so if you have to rush,
I'm all
I don't want
set.
your beer to go bad. Say
I was
back.
gonna say, I have to leave
This
with
is really
Julie.
sacrilegious that I'm even here, I'm just saying.
Amen.
So now we're gonna go to discussion and possible vote on all items related to the general budget. Joe, I think I will have, actually, I'll start this one too. So, at some point, the rubber has to meet the road, unless we're gonna just vote to approve this budget that was submitted to us. Now, we've had several people look for asks and add-backs, and I think we should tackle some of the add-backs, at least in theory, before I don't wanna lead the town administrator astray on what he's supposed to do, and at some point, as I said, we have to vote this budget. So, I guess on importance level, Joe, I think you and I had a brief conversation today. Yesterday, it's all a blend, but it was related to the cemetery director's ask for a part-time person to help her when she's on vacation and to give her some help. You had said in a meeting with the board at one point, I believe, that you had already addressed that. Do you want to address where we're at with that?
Sure. And then at some point, I'd like to try to tie it all together.
Okay.
But to the specific question about cemetery administration, there is a plan that administration has to support that employee. I can't say that I would characterize it the same way that it was characterized last week, because if the town, through administration or anybody else, demanded that any employee work 24/7, 365, we'd be in big trouble. And I've had conversations with that employee and with staff, and to emphasize that we do have procedures in place for any employee to use their contractual benefited rights of time off, be that sick, personal, comp, or otherwise, in vacation or otherwise. So one of the reasons why that request was not factored into the enhancement of services, as with some of the many others, as you get into the specifics, is because I think there's other ways that we can handle that. But isn't that the answer is no? It's more that the answer is there may be another way to achieve what we're looking for without impacting upon the budget. So for cemetery administration directly, that's, to me, is a fairly simple thing to do with staff. Now, I wouldn't go forward on that if there's a desire, a great desire, to go with the position. Because it doesn't make sense with the time that we have left in the fiscal year to do that effort if we're going with the part-time position. But I do want to emphasize that that employee, that department, and all the department heads and employees have the right and the ability to take time off, and we, the town, cover their functions when they're gone. So to that one specifically, there's any number of things we can do, and I continue to have conversations with staff.
I guess they go hand in hand, because I know, at least speaking with one other board member, there is a concern that that person would be not able to take a vacation. So I would be comfortable not adding a position, I'll speak for myself, not adding a position so long as you have a plan to cover when that person is on vacation and has time off.
Yeah, and if I could, that plan has been in place perhaps for the entire fiscal year, if memory serves.
So prior to Robin coming and pleading for that position, you had already taken care of that?
I would say not necessarily to her satisfaction as far as her operation, but yes, we in administration and in the town do not deny anyone the ability to take their earned time, because it's illegal to do that without a justification, And I know that the employee has enjoyed vacations and time off. Well, I can't say she enjoyed them, but she has taken them. For me, I'm hoping to use this question as more of a segue to, and that's why I had asked for this particular agenda item to be there, is to first of all wrap up what we all just went through last week and tonight, and what I'll be going through next week with the Finance Committee. But I'll yield for a moment if I've answered the questions on specifically the cemetery.
I think if it's gonna be wrapped up as a whole with you, I would just yield my time to you.
Thank you. So,
Michael, can I just ask one
Go
follow-up
ahead.
question? You talk about doing, for this fiscal year, it would continue on through next fiscal year as well?
correct. One of the challenges that I've seen, and this goes back to my time as the Assistant Town Administrator, is we have a number of single-person department, and of course, they're all department heads. And I recognize that I have two proposed such. But as you heard with the harbor master, natural resources and harbor go well together in that regard as far as backup. It's been difficult with information technology, but we're able to rely upon the Barnstable County IT services. And so for me, for a cemetery, it dovetails with Public Works. And in fact, there's a dotted line relationship because Robin has to rely on personnel in the DPW who are cemetery employees. Public Works employees, but their job is to support cemetery functions. And so that's what I'm always looking for, is to make sure that there's some connection from one to the other.
Thank you.
And it's meant to be durable fiscal year to fiscal year.
Julie?
So, just to follow up on that question, if we have somebody, and I'm asking,
Mhm.
if we have somebody who is able to be cross-trained to take on her duties if she's on vacation, or were to leave or something, I mean,
Correct.
you know, that's a wealth of knowledge in one person that we need to make sure that we're covered if for any reason anything were to happen or she's gone on vacation, et cetera. So is there somebody that could be dedicated even to be training for that position? I don't know how many hours a day that takes, but is there somebody that can have those hours carved out of their normal function that they're currently doing?
Short answer is absolutely and without a doubt.
Okay.
Longer answer is, we have to be mindful of other collective bargaining requirements.
Mhm.
We have to be mindful of existing job descriptions. But for me, having come from the private sector, about 15 years ago, that would be all other duties as assigned by management. That's where that would be covered. So, yeah, because what you're talking about is sustainability of the function on the one hand, but also, if necessary, succession planning. Because it is an existing program of the town that is well established and a need of the town. And so if something were to happen, that operation isn't going to stop because it can't, because we have an obligation on many levels.
Yeah, and again, it's a job that really, it's not predictable, right? I mean, you never know when you're needed and whatever.
Right.
So I just think that that's important, and again, if we can not have another position, that's great. As long as it's whoever that support person can be is also sustainable.
Right.
Don?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. That's kind of where I'm landing, because ultimately, if you're going to make the argument that you can't have an employee working 24/7, 365 days a year at the director level, you can't tell me, with only a few weeks left before town meeting, how you're going to structure this to have a part-time person available at exactly the times that are needed. There isn't any flexibility. You can't hire somebody saying, okay, you're at will 19 hours a week, and we'll tell you that week when we want you. It's not possible to do that. So I'd sooner pursue this and see if we can make it work. Plus which, there's the time element. We're constructing this like on the fly right going into town meeting.
Yeah, and I think anything we can do to, not have to create something
Yeah.
new is great, but
That's what I'm saying, I'm agreeing.
we just need to make sure that it can work.
Mary?
Yeah, I I agree with what the other selectmen have said. The biggest concern to me is I'm guessing she must be using her cell phone to get these calls if she's getting them when she's on vacation. So we have to have some kind of mechanism, particularly on the weekend when nobody's in town hall, that somehow though she can get the call and send it to you, or that's my concern, how that works logistically.
Angela.
But I trust you, Joe, that you'll work that out.
John, I don't know if you want to weigh in on this, but I think it sounds like management is doing what management's supposed to do.
Yeah, and the position is what, was it 12,500 or
Yeah.
something like that?
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree with Mr. Howell's point. I mean, how do you know when that part-time person is needed? You know, that's the thing. So it's totally up to you folks, yeah.
Okay. Joe, where do you want to go from here?
Well, first I want to end the discussion on budgets, as you have all done for the last 2 weeks, by starting with a thank you. And I'll start with everyone in front of me, here at the boards and in the audience and on the screen as well, for, you know, this is a high holiday right now. And yet here we are and we persevere because our town meeting is 46 days away. And I want to, I like the fact that this section is now empty, because it was filled last week and this week with department heads, and they've come and they've presented and they've explained and they've defended, and that's what this is supposed to be about. And I want to thank them in absentia, and I will thank them in person for what they do day in and day out, and what they've been doing and enduring in this budget process. And so first, a thanks to everybody involved, knowing that we're not done yet, because Finance Committee has their charter-required public hearings next Thursday night on both the capital plan and the operating budget as currently presented. And you know, there's a lot of work that's gone into it. There's a lot of work to be done. But one of the things that I want to emphasize, and it ties back to what we just talked about, is the budget that I presented on February 7th and the budget that was turned over by the Board of Selectmen on February 22nd was a balanced budget, and was a budget that was built, as I've said before, on a statement of priorities. Because that's what municipal budgets are meant to be, a statement of a town's priorities. And so I think I've made clear what the priorities were that I relied upon and the reasons for those. One word that we have used, I think, or has been said, is I think inaccurate, and that is cuts. What you heard over the last week and this week, in many instances, were department heads who were advocating for an enhancement of services. And if you saw the questionnaire, the first part of the questionnaire that they worked on talked about their present mission, their present budget, and how they accomplished that. And then question 5 got to what enhancements would you look to make? And that's significant, because we weren't dealing with a budget deficit. Now, there are some other things that are being contemplated to add that we have to account for, and I can speak to that tonight, but I'd be more than happy to speak to it Monday night. But this budget has not been cut. Operating budgets, departments, and services have not been cut. We have had to make choices on enhancement of services. And so you heard this evening for enhancement of service for the harbor master. You heard enhancement of service last week for cemetery and other groups. And so what we're dealing with is a positive aspect for the town, but now comes the toughest part. What are the sustaining priorities that the Board of Selectmen want to envision with the final budget? And then what would the Finance Committee's recommendations be on those? Now, I've purposely tried to, which any of you that know me know how difficult it is, for me to try and hold my tongue, meaning I could have added to any of the department heads who spoke last week and this week about how important their enhancement of services are, because those aren't lost on me. As an example, the harbor master, a seasonal, full-time for the summer person to help with all that goes on at our marina that has been enhanced over the years, that we have a sustainable fee structure. And I wanted to consider that to be part of the commitment to public safety. but I didn't want to blur the lines. Harbor masters aren't public safety, as John knows, as he told me. They're considered under the Commonwealth to be recreation. Well, when a gentleman lost his life in Nantucket Sound flying, that's not a recreation activity. And when 2 young college-age students were trapped and mercifully rescued before a nor'easter, hours before the nor'easter, that's not a recreation activity. And so for every one of those enhancement of services, I could agree with them. The question before me and the board and finance committee is, what are the priorities that we're gonna end up with? And so I just wanna emphasize that budgets aren't cut yet. Now, I have met, as John Chori knows, today with capital outlay, and I've recommended a series of reductions in capital outlay to free up free cash, if need be, and to go to other priorities. Stabilization, OPEB, wage adjustments, and several others. And so the town of Harwich remains in great shape. And what we have is our annual struggle to make our choices and to figure out what our priorities are. And as Labor Council said to me on a different matter, you know, when you negotiate, it's easy to say yes. The negotiation's toughest when you have to say no. And I know you folks are not looking to say yes to everybody. The tough part is, who are the ones we are going to say no to? And then, Mr. Chairman, very quickly, if I could, there is information in the packet. Yesterday, I participated in a lunchtime webinar that was put on by the Mass Municipal Association, of which the town is a member. So I, as the administrator, you folks as board, and I know John can serve on the Mass Municipal Finance Committee roundtable as well. They gave an excellent update on legislative efforts in this current legislative cycle. Excuse me. This is my body getting back at me for working on St. Patrick's Day. And that's grape. That's nothing else. Gotta put that out there. In your packet this evening, I think, Mr. Chairman and members of the board, is one of the facets of the Mass Municipal Association's legislative policy slate, for lack of a better word, for this year. And I wanted to bring it up tonight and just put it out there in front of everybody, because all of us can impact upon this. One of the key facets of the MMA legislative priorities for this legislative cycle to impact upon fiscal year 2023 is an increase in what I love is a great acronym that is UGA, which is Unrestricted General Government Aid, what we consider to be local aid. And so MMA is pushing for a 7.3% increase in the unrestricted general government aid for all municipalities. And they've demonstrated, and to me, demonstrated very clearly, that over the last 3 fiscal years, the Commonwealth has gotten away from really where local aid is supposed to be. And so for the town of Harwich, we could see an increase of $35,000. Now, $35,000 isn't a lot. I can tell you that that generally covers a permanent, part-time administrative person, but every little bit helps. And so I will be talking to the board at more detail on Monday night about perhaps the town taking a position on that and reaching out to our legislative delegation. Because MMA is advocating for us, and there's many things that if we can get our legislators to help, this isn't just gonna benefit Harwich, it's gonna benefit every one of the 351 cities and towns in the Commonwealth. But for us, it's another $35,000 that we could have come our way. And so that's what we have to do next. We've now transitioned from hearing the budget discussion, and now we transition to the advocacy, but also reaching out to our partners at state government and saying, please help.
Don?
Yeah, I wish I could feel as utopian as Joe does. I was on the board of directors for the MMA in early to mid-2000s, and we did a study. We actually went to the Fed and tried to work out formulas that were mutually beneficial, but as long as you wind up with a large, you don't represent the land, you represent numbers of people. And so long as you wind up with a legislature delegation where you've got the Suffolk area where there's numbers of representatives, and here on Cape Cod, you've got like 7 towns that have 1 representative. This is a historic problem, and they are never going to wind up fully funding us because we don't have the numbers, and we never will have the numbers. You know, I hate to throw cold water on this, but this has been going on for more than 2 decades that I know of.
Larry, any comments?
None.
Julie? Mary?
No.
Okay. John, I'll turn it over to you. Questions or comments to the board? We're gonna have a full discussion on budget Monday night.
Yeah, I looked at the agenda, it's pretty,
You have
pretty
a-
packed.
Yeah, you
budget.
have a, yeah, we're gonna be late.
That's how we do
But
it.
any asks or
No,
comments?
just, when you mentioned ad backs, I thought we were gonna go, you were gonna go through all the other, people that were looking for money, but you stopped at,
Yeah, and we could do that exercise, I think.
I'm not pressing to do
I
it,
don't
but
think we're gonna do that tonight.
Okay, that's fine. Nope, I think it's good. I think the free cash explanation is great. I like the revenues at 10%. I feel comfortable. That's a good thought. That added $640 right there to help you balance your budget, Michael. And I don't have any more questions. Mark?
No questions.
Angelo? Karen?
I'm good, thank you.
Nope. Mark?
Thanks for all your hard work. No
Yes.
questions.
Yeah, I mean, all of the ad backs, as we'll call them.
Yeah.
It doesn't really add up to a whole lot of money.
I want Amy to get her shed, though.
Right. I just want.
Those tools are gonna hit her in the
Maybe
head
a
in
new
that
flo-
car,
maybe
you
a
know?
new floor. But lots to talk about, and I think
Yeah.
to
No, it's a
Joe,
good start.
we'll have the full conversation about what he recommended to capital today.
I participated in that.
Yeah.
I'm fully aware of that, yeah.
So there'll be a lot to talk about.
Yep.
Joe, the only piece I'd like to end on is, I'm still confused, and I know public safety was one of your priorities, and the board has supported your priorities. I don't like the 3 police cruisers in the operating budget. And that's only my take, and I would ask the rest of the board members to give theirs, but I believe that belongs in capital, and then we should pick through capital what we're willing to support and what we're not. But adding that into the operating budget, and I even mentioned OPEB being paid for out of free cash and not out of the operating budget. We take those two items out of the operating budget, there's 400 and something thousand right off the top. So I guess I would ask for direction from the other board members, and I'll start with Don.
Yep. I totally agree.
Larry?
Yeah, I'm trying to remember what, those used to be operational, and I'm trying to remember why they were moved to capital, and I lose that at the time, so they should go back to capital.
Well, police, unlike others, and the chiefs made the argument, their police cruisers get driven X amount of miles a year and fairly aggressively. So they have to replace them more often, so I think the argument was always made that it was a budget item, but I think, we either go across the board with budget items on vehicles.
Yeah, I still would go back to the old definition of budget.
But I think it should be
Capital, rather, as being
capital.
financial measure, not a
Julie?
time measure.
Yeah, no, I commented last week, or was that this week?
I don't know.
No, it was this week, I guess. That, I think we have a lot of vehicles, and I think there's probably another 1 or 2 that could get moved.
I'm just talking about moving them out of the budget
Oh,
and into
into
capital,
capital,
and then we'll
yeah.
dissect capital after that.
Yeah, but I think, so I agree with that, but I also am questioning whether or not there's another couple somewhere in there that we could move to capital.
And Joe, is there other vehicles in anyone else's budgets?
I don't think.
Oh, there is.
I thought there
Operating
is.
budgets now.
They're all in capital.
Okay.
Are they all in capital?
Yeah.
All right.
Mary?
They were cut today.
I agree. I was surprised to see vehicles in operating. I thought they would all be capital.
Okay. Is that enough direction, Joe?
Absolutely.
And then, why don't we tackle right now the DPW piece that we spoke of earlier tonight, unless you want to do that on Monday as well.
No, I think we can do it Monday.
Okay.
Michael, may I say one thing?
Go ahead.
On the agenda here tonight, I know you're not gonna vote the Monomoy schools, but we voted the tech schools.
Yeah, I'm
the
gonna
other
take
day.
a motion
I mean,
on that.
If you'd like the motion,
Yeah.
I mean.
We're gonna take a motion on that.
On the tech? you
Yep,
mean, right?
if
Yeah.
someone's willing to make it.
I'll make it.
Don, go ahead.
I move that we support the tech budget as presented.
Second.
Moved and seconded, I'll do a roll call vote. Mary?
Aye.
Julie?
Aye.
Don?
Aye.
Larry?
Aye.
And I'm an aye.
You want to budget down?
You want to make
Make
a,
a motion, to adjourn, Mark?
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
Second? Second, motion made and seconded. All those in favor of adjournment?
Aye.
The meeting is over, there'll be no more discussion. Thank you.
how about on
Move
this
we
side?
adjourn.
Second.
Moved and seconded, roll call. Don?
Aye.
Larry?
Aye.
Julie?
Aye.
Mary?
Aye.
And I'm an aye. Thank you for joining us, Mary.